Welcome everyone to today's deep dive. I I actually have to start with a little personal celebration today.
Oh,
Yeah, because frankly, I am riding high. I checked my retirement accounts this morning and I finally crossed a major milestone.
okay, let's hear it.
$500,000.
Wow.
500,000 sitting right there in my 401k. I mean, I've been maxing out the employer match for years.
Right.
I've been diligently saving cash in my traditional bank accounts, riding the index funds, and totally ignoring the market noise.
Doing exactly what you're told.
Exactly.
Uh,
I've essentially followed the standard financial advice to the letter, and looking at that number today, I feel safe.
Safe.
Incredibly secure, like I've built this impenetrable wall around my future. Okay, let's unpack this. Because to me, this feels like winning the game. You hit that kind of number, and you assume you're insulated from the chaos out there.
I really hate to interrupt your victory lap here,
Oh.
but we really need to completely reframe what that number actually means.
Yeah.
What you're feeling right now, that sense of absolute security, is an illusion.
An illusion. Come on.
It is. In fact, it is exactly what we are focusing our intelligence briefing on today. Because a retiree with $500,000 in a traditional retirement account is actually far more vulnerable to government confiscation than a retiree with $50,000.
Wait. More vulnerable?
Much more. And a retiree with $5 million, if they've made one specific, incredibly common mistake, is the most vulnerable of all.
Having more money, having $500,000 saved up, makes me more of a target than someone who barely has anything saved.
Yes.
That completely goes against everything we are ever taught about personal finance. If you have 50,000, you're constantly stressed. If you have $500,000, you breathe easy. Are you telling me I shouldn't be breathing easy?
I am telling you that you are looking at the wrong metrics.
How so?
Traditional finance focuses entirely on accumulation. There are dozens of videos and articles out there telling you about the levels of retirement wealth.
Sure, you see them all the time.
Right. They'll show you a beautifully colored chart. They'll tell you exactly what percentile of wealth you fall into based on your age.
They congratulate you for being in the top 20%.
Exactly. And then they just move on.
Yeah.
But our mission for this deep dive is entirely different. We are looking at the 5 levels of confiscation.
The 5 levels of confiscation.
Yes. Instead of asking you which level of wealth you have achieved, we are asking a much more forensic question. Which level of your wealth can the government actually take from you?
Jeez.
And exactly what legal mechanisms do they use to do it?
I mean, when you phrase it like that, my sense of security is already starting to evaporate.
Good. You need to be alert.
But I have to push back a little here. It's my money. I earned it. I paid my share of taxes on my salary. I deferred the rest legally into an account created by the government.
So we aren't just looking at the balance sheet.
Right.
We are looking at the structural reality of where that money lives.
Okay.
Because wealth in retirement isn't just about how much money you have.
Yeah.
It is about where that money sits.
Yeah.
Who knows about it? And what specific legal authority the government has to reach in and take it.
All right.
Today, we are opening the file on these 5 tiers, examining the exact threat profile for every net worth level.
From 0 all the way up.
From 0 all the way up to $5 million and beyond. By the time we finish this deep dive, you, the listener, will know exactly how the IRS targets each tier.
I am listening.
You will understand why the advice you've been fed might be leading you into a trap. But more importantly, we are going to lay out the exact defense playbook.
Thank goodness.
We will show you how to build a legal fortress around your specific tier of wealth.
All right, well, consider my bubble officially burst. But I am wide awake now. I thought I was sitting in a fortress, but it sounds like I might just be sitting in a glass house.
The very transparent glass house.
Let's start at the foundation of this pyramid then. We have 5 levels to get through. Level 1. What is the baseline here? What are the parameters for this tier?
Level 1 is what we classify as the survival tier.
Survival tier.
This encompasses individuals and households with a net worth between $0 and $100,000 in total retirement assets.
Okay, so up to 100,000. Now, my immediate assumption here is that this group must be the absolute most vulnerable.
Why do you say that?
Well, I was looking through our source material before we started, and the data from the Federal Reserve is pretty sobering. Roughly 1 in 4 American households approaching retirement falls into this exact range.
A quarter of the population.
A quarter of the population, and many of them are heavily, if not entirely, reliant on Social Security.
Which averages out to what?
About $22,000 a year. If you are listening to this and you fall into this bracket, you know how tight that margin is.
Extremely tight.
If you have that little cushion, any kind of confiscation or financial shock would be devastating. They have to be the easiest targets for having things taken away.
What's fascinating here is that the reality is the exact opposite. Counterintuitively, this group is the absolute least likely to be directly targeted by the IRS or the government for asset seizure.
The least likely? Why is that? I mean, if you're looking for revenue, wouldn't you cast the widest net possible? And this is a massive chunk of the population.
You have to look at the forensic mechanics of how confiscation actually works in the real world.
Okay.
Seizing a retirement account or levying a bank account isn't just a matter of pressing a button on a computer in Washington.
Right, it's a process.
It is a massive legal and bureaucratic process. It requires notices, hearings, court orders, and crucially, dealing with hardship exemptions.
Hardship exemptions.
Yes, at level 1, the hardship threshold makes these individuals practically invisible to direct government seizure.
Invisible. That's an interesting way to put it. So it's not that the government is being altruistic.
Not at all.
It's just a matter of cost-benefit analysis.
Exactly. It's the administrative burden. The legal cost and bureaucratic friction required to seize assets from someone living on $22,000 a year simply isn't worth it for the extracting agency.
The juice isn't worth the squeeze.
Exactly. If the IRS initiates a levy against a household at level 1, that household can immediately file a Form 433A.
Form 433A.
Yes, proving financial hardship. The legal protections for basic living standards create a procedural shield. So from a direct structural targeting standpoint, the IRS essentially looks right past them.
Because they're too small.
They are too small to yield a return on the legal effort required to extract the capital.
Wow, okay, so for the folks in that survival tier, I guess I can breathe a little sigh of relief for them.
I wouldn't do that just yet.
No. I mean, if they are practically invisible to direct seizure, at least their baseline is safe. They can just focus on budgeting what they have.
Do not mistake invisibility for immunity.
Okay.
I didn't say they aren't subject to confiscation. I said they aren't targeted for direct seizure.
What's the difference?
The wealth of level 1 is absolutely being confiscated. But it is happening via an entirely different mechanism, a silent one.
A silent confiscation, you mean inflation?
Precisely. We need to look at the math of slow-motion confiscation.
Right.
Let's take that average Social Security check you mentioned.
$22,000 a year.
$22,000. The mechanics of monetary policy dictate that the purchasing power of that currency is constantly degrading.
Constantly.
If inflation runs at a rate that causes that $22,000 to lose 15% of its purchasing power every single decade, what is actually happening?
I mean, let me just run that math in my head. If you lose 15% of your purchasing power, that $22,000 essentially feels like less than $19,000 after 10 years.
Yes.
In terms of what it can actually buy at the grocery store.
Exactly. They are getting poorer without a single dollar actually leaving their bank account.
After 10 years, they still receive the nominal amount.
Perhaps adjusted slightly for cost of living, though those adjustments rarely capture the true inflation of essential goods like food, energy, and housing.
Which is what they spend most of their money on.
Right. So the actual real-world value is reduced. This is a wealth transfer. It is confiscation.
Wow.
It just happens without a judge ever signing a warrant, without an IRS agent ever knocking on the door, and without a tax form being filed.
It's just baked into the system.
It is the silent, structural extraction of purchasing power to finance government debt.
That is incredibly insidious when you think about it.
It is.
It's like a leak in a tire that's so slow you don't notice it until you're stranded on the side of the road. No one comes and slashes the tire, it just slowly goes flat.
That's a great way to look at it.
So level 1, the survival tier, their threat is the silent drain of inflation because they simply don't have the asset base, the compounding interest, or the hard assets to outpace it.
Correct. They are trapped in a slow degradation of their standard of living.
Which brings us to level 2.
Level 2. This is where I am. Yes, your favorite tier.
This is the $100,000 to $500,000 tier. The tier I was so happily celebrating 10 minutes ago. Our source material calls this the stability tier.
The stability.
This is the median, right? The great American middle class. I've got my 401k. I'm diversified. I feel good. Tell me why I shouldn't feel good.
Yes. Level 2 is the median. And I need to deliver a very hard truth here.
Lay it on me.
Based on forensic macro analysis, level 2 is the most dangerous phase on the entire pyramid.
The most dangerous.
We classify the level 2 individual as the sitting duck.
The sitting duck. Okay, I feel personally attacked.
It's not personal, it's structural.
But honestly, I have to fight you on this.
Go ahead.
Every financial advisor, every book, every podcast tells you to defer your taxes now because you'll be in a lower tax bracket when you retire.
That is the standard line.
Even if they tax me later, I'm still coming out ahead because I got the employer match. It's free money. How is having $500,000 making me a sitting duck?
Let's dissect your defense. The employer match is an excellent tool for accumulation, yes.
Right.
We aren't disputing the math of compounding interest. But you are ignoring the architecture of visibility
Visibility.
and the mechanics of distribution. Think back to level 1. We established that they are too small to be noticed. The administrative burden is too high to target them.
Yeah, invisible.
Now let's look at level 3, which we will get to in a moment. Level 3 individuals have enough resources to afford advanced legal and tax defense structures.
Okay.
But you, at level 2, are trapped in the middle. You have accumulated enough capital to be highly visible and incredibly profitable to target.
Right.
But you are too small to afford the complex, bespoke legal defenses that the ultra-wealthy use to shield their assets.
So I have exactly enough money for the government to care, but not enough money to hire an army of lawyers to stop them.
Precisely. You are the low-hanging fruit.
Mm.
And we have to examine why you were so visible.
Okay, what?
You felt secure because you maxed out your 401k, maybe you have a traditional IRA, and you keep your cash in a standard commercial bank.
Right, doing exactly what I was told to do. It's the standard American playbook.
And by doing exactly what you were told, you placed 100% of your wealth into systems that are totally transparent to the government.
Transparent?
Your 401k, your IRA, your bank accounts, they are completely illuminated to the IRS via automated reporting forms. You have no privacy in this tier.
Like what forms are tracking this without me even doing anything? I just check my app.
Forms like the 5500 and the 1099-R. Let's look at the mechanics.
Okay.
The Form 5500 is essentially an annual report that retirement plans must file. It ensures the government has a macro view of the capital held within these structures,
So they see the big picture.
verifying compliance and tracking the sheer volume of taxable wealth sitting in wait. And then you have the 1099-R,
Which does what?
which reports distributions from pensions, annuities, retirement or profit-sharing plans, IRAs, and so on. Every single dollar that moves, sits, or grows in those traditional accounts is tracked, cataloged, and reported to the IRS automatically.
Automatically.
You don't have to lift a finger. The financial institutions act as deputized agents of the IRS. It is an automated intelligence network built around your savings.
Okay, let's unpack this. So they know exactly what I have to the penny.
To the penny.
But knowing what I have and actually taking it are two different things. Earlier I said, even if they tax me, I'm in a lower bracket. How is the money actually taken at level 2? Is there a knock at the door?
This is the crucial paradigm shift you need to make. Modern confiscation is rarely violent or dramatic.
It's not guys in suits showing up at my house.
No.
Yeah.
It is structural. It is built into the very legislation that created the accounts you're using.
It's in.
At level 2, the primary extraction mechanism isn't a sudden seizure. It is forced RMDs,
Forced what?
required minimum distributions.
RMDs.
Right.
I've heard of them, but it always seemed like a future me problem. I'm decades away from that.
And that is the trap of the sitting duck. You think it's a future problem, but the snare was set the day you opened the account.
How so?
Under the Secure 2.0 Act, the rules have been updated, but the underlying threat remains exactly the same. Starting at age 73, you are legally forced to begin taking taxable withdrawals from your traditional 401k and IRA accounts.
But wait, what if I don't want to?
It doesn't matter.
What if I have a pension or Social Security, or I just want to live frugally and pass that $500,000 down to my kids?
You don't have a choice.
Really?
Whether you need the money to live on or not is entirely irrelevant to the IRS. If you want to leave that money in the account to continue compounding, too bad.
Man.
If you want to pass it on untouched to your children, too bad. The government gave you a tax break on the front end when you deposited that money.
Right.
And they have been waiting patiently for decades. They owed a percentage of that account, and at age 73, they decide it is time to collect.
They call the loan.
And the way they get it is by forcing you to liquidate portions of your wealth and counting those liquidations as taxable income.
So they don't seize the $500K in one dramatic swoop.
No, that would cause widespread panic and political upheaval. Instead, they extract it methodically. They force you onto a schedule, governed by IRS actuarial tables,
Is it percentage?
where every year a percentage of your life's work is forced out of its tax-protected shell and subjected to income tax.
And it gets bigger.
It starts at a few percent and scales up as you age. It is automated, forced taxation. It is confiscation on a schedule.
Confiscation on a schedule.
You are a sitting duck because the trap was laid the moment you opened the account and the jaws of the trap snap shut automatically on your 73rd birthday.
Wow.
And regarding your point about being in a lower tax bracket in retirement,
Yeah, what about that?
that is one of the greatest myths of modern finance. With the national debt where it is, do you truly believe tax rates will be lower 30 years from now when you are forced to withdraw?
Man, you just completely dismantled my argument.
It's the reality.
If tax rates go up to pay for the national debt, my deferred taxes just became a massive liability.
Exactly.
That changes the entire way I look at my 401k dashboard. I've been looking at it like it's my $500,000.
It's not.
But really, it's a joint account with the IRS.
Yeah.
And they hold the veto power.
Yes, they do.
They get to decide when they make their withdrawals, and they get to decide the tax rate at the time of the withdrawal.
That is the most accurate way to view a tax-deferred account. It is a joint venture with a sovereign entity that possesses the unilateral power to change the terms of the agreement and the tax rates before you are allowed to withdraw.
All right, so level 2 is terrifying because I'm basically a transparent piggy bank waiting to be cracked open on a set date.
Precisely.
But surely if I just keep saving, if I push past this 500K mark, I can buy my way into safety, right?
You would think so.
Which brings us to level 3. Our notes call this the comfort tier.
The comfort tier.
This ranges from $500,000 to $1.5 million. If I hustle, maybe I inherit a little something, maybe the market has a great decade-long bull run, I cross that 500K threshold.
Okay.
I'm a millionaire now. I must have some safety. If you, the listener, are sitting in this bracket, you probably feel pretty accomplished.
This raises an important question. Does more money actually mean fewer threats? Or does it just introduce brand new, more sophisticated threats?
I have a sinking feeling I know the answer.
Yes.
The government just brings out bigger nets.
Exactly. When you cross into level 3, the comfort tier, you aren't leaving the crosshairs. You are just becoming what financial planners often consider the sweet spot.
Sweet spot.
But to the government, it's the sweet spot target.
Oh, great.
At level 3, 3 brand new vectors of attack emerge that you didn't have to worry about at level 2. You are no longer just a sitting duck. You are a high-value asset.
Okay, what is threat vector 1 for the millionaire next door?
Audit probability. Audits. At level 3, you are dealing with a larger asset place, which means larger forced distributions.
The RMDs are bigger.
When you combine your required minimum distributions, which are now substantial because your account balances are higher, with your Social Security benefits, and perhaps a pension if you are lucky enough to have one, you artificially inflate your adjusted gross income, or AGI.
And AGI is the magic number the IRS looks at. It's the line on the tax return that dictates everything else.
Precisely. Your inflated AGI automatically kicks you into higher tax brackets, stripping away that lower bracket and retirement myth you held on to earlier.
Right.
But more insidiously, it triggers automated IRS scrutiny. You cross algorithmic thresholds that flag your returns for audits.
Algorithmic threshold.
They know that at level 3, there is enough meat on the bone to make an audit highly profitable for the Treasury.
Right. I have enough to pay up.
You have enough complexity to make a mistake and enough capital to pay the penalty. So your very success mathematically increases your probability of being investigated and squeezed for more revenue.
So just by existing, being successful, and following the rules of their forced withdrawals, I'm painting a giant target on my back for an audit. Fantastic.
That's threat vector 1.
But threat vector 2 is the one that really made my jaw drop when I was reading the prep materials for this deep dive.
Yeah.
Here's where it gets really interesting, folks. The whole pitch to the American public was that this legislation was supposedly to protect us, right? To stop the banks from gambling with our money.
To protect the system, not necessarily the individual depositor.
Ouch.
Deep within the Dodd-Frank Act is a mechanism called the Orderly Liquidation Authority.
Orderly Liquidation Authority.
Most people understand what a bailout is. That's when the government uses taxpayer money to save a failing bank. It's an external rescue.
Right.
But a bail-in is entirely different. It is an internal confiscation.
Explain the mechanics of a bail-in. Break this down like I'm 5 years old, because this is the stuff that keeps people awake at night. If I have money in the bank, it's my money. How can they touch it?
That is the first misconception we must shatter.
Okay.
When you walk into a bank and deposit $100 into a vault, you think of it like a storage unit.
Yeah, they're holding it for me.
You think you are paying them to keep your money safe. But legally, that is not what happens. Legally, when you deposit money in a bank, it is no longer your money.
Wait, what?
You have just given the bank an unsecured loan. You are an unsecured creditor to the bank, and they owe you a debt.
Wait, I'm a creditor. Like, I'm lending them money?
Yes, and in a bankruptcy hierarchy, if a corporation fails, secured creditors get paid first. Unsecured creditors are at the very back of the line. So if a bank becomes insolvent and fails, the FDIC insures your deposits up to $250,000. That is your safety net.
Right. We all know the FDIC limit.
But what about the money above that limit? Say you are at level 3 and you have $750,000 in a single bank account because you just sold your small business.
Right.
You have $500,000 of completely uninsured deposits.
Yeah.
Under the orderly liquidation authority of Dodd-Frank, the bank is legally permitted to take your uninsured deposits and convert them into equity shares of the failed bank to recapitalize itself.
Wait, let me process this.
Yeah.
If the bank makes terrible bets on commercial real estate, goes bankrupt, they can legally reach into my checking account.
Yes.
Take any dollar I have over $250K.
Yes.
And say, thanks for the cash to save our skin. Here is some worthless stock in our bankrupt bank instead. They just take the $500,000.
Yes, they erase their liability to you to balance their own books.
But has this actually ever happened? Or is this just some obscure legal theory hidden in a 2,000-page bill that no one ever uses? I mean, surely there were to be riots in the streets.
This is absolutely crucial historical context. It is not hypothetical, and it is not a conspiracy theory. It happened in 2013 in the nation of Cyprus.
Cyprus?
During the European debt crisis, the banking sector in Cyprus, which was heavily exposed to Greek debt, collapsed. The European Central Bank refused to offer a standard bailout.
So what did they do?
Instead, they forced a bail-in. In a matter of days, the government simply froze the bank accounts.
Froze them?
If you went to the ATM, it didn't work. The bank doors were locked. If you had money over the insured limit, usually held by businesses or retirees, the equivalent of level 3, you woke up to find it gone.
Gone.
They wiped out 47% of uninsured deposits overnight. 47%. Just erased from the ledgers and converted to bank equity.
A 37% haircut on your life savings. Just poof, gone. Because the bank failed. What happened to those people?
Their businesses collapsed because they couldn't make payroll. Their retirement plans were decimated. People went to sleep wealthy and woke up fundamentally compromised.
That's horrifying.
And the terrifying part is, the legal architecture to do exactly that exists right now under Dodd-Frank in the United States.
Here.
If you are at level 3 listening to this and holding massive cash deposits in a single institution, you are willfully exposing yourself to a Cyprus-style confiscation.
That is terrifying. Okay, so if I'm at level 3, the stock market is a tax trap with RMDs and audits. The bank is a bail-in trap with Dodd-Frank.
Correct.
So what do people naturally do? If you are a listener with $1 million, you start looking for exits. You say, I'm going to escape the financial system entirely. I'm going to buy physical assets.
Hard assets.
I'm going to buy gold bars, silver coins, and bury them in my backyard or put them in a floor safe. Surely that's outside the system, right? Which brings us to threat vector 3.
The collectibles tax.
Collectibles tax.
The government anticipated the desire of the wealthy to flee into hard assets during times of inflation or banking instability. If you try to escape the banking system by purchasing physical gold or silver, you step into a very specific legal snare designed by the IRS.
What snare?
Section 408 meters of the Internal Revenue Code.
And what does 408 meters do? Because normally if I buy a stock, say I buy Apple and sell it a few years later for a profit, I pay long-term capital gains tax.
Which is usually 15%.
Or maybe 20% if I'm a really high earner.
Right.
That's the reward for taking the investment risk.
Exactly. But under Section 408 meters, the IRS classifies physical gold, silver, and other precious metals not as standard investment assets, but as collectibles.
Collectibles, like a rare stamp, a piece of fine art, or a vintage baseball card.
Exactly. Because of this classification, if you sell your physical metals for a profit, you are explicitly denied the standard lower capital gains rates. Instead, you are hit with a punishing 28% maximum collectibles tax rate.
28%. Let me map this out.
Okay.
Let's say I'm terrified of a bank bail-in, so I take $100,000 and buy physical gold.
Okay.
Over 10 years, massive inflation hits, just like we talked about in level 1. The gold does exactly what it's supposed to do. It protects my purchasing power, and the value goes up to $200,000.
You have a $100,000 gain.
Right. When I finally need to sell that gold to pay for my medical bills or my living expenses, the IRS steps in and takes $28,000 of that profit simply because they labeled it a collectible instead an investment.
That is the exact math. It is a friction cost intentionally designed to penalize those who try to maintain wealth outside the digital, easily tracked financial system.
They punish you for leaving.
They cannot physically stop you from buying gold, but they can make the exit tax so punitive that it acts as a form of confiscation on your purchasing power. They are taking nearly a third of your inflation protection.
Man. Level 3 is an absolute minefield. The AGI audits triggered by success, the Dodd-Frank bail-ins threatening your cash, the 28% collectibles tax punishing your physical metals. Every door out of the room has a trap wired to it.
It's all structural.
Okay, let's keep climbing. Let's say you, the listener, navigate all of that. You build an incredibly successful business, you invest brilliantly, you avoid the bail-ins, and you make it to level 4.
Level 4.
Our outline calls this prosperity.
Oui.
We're talking $1.5 million to $5 million in net worth. Now, my assumption here is that multimillionaires are completely safe.
Oh, really?
Why? Because at this level, you aren't doing it alone. You don't just have an E-Trade account. You have an entourage.
An entourage.
You have CPAs, you have wealth managers, you have financial advisors on retainer, you have professionals whose entire job, whose fiduciary duty is to protect your money. You can afford the armor.
And that assumption is precisely what we call the illusion of professional protection.
Illusion.
This is where we find the partially defended. You assume you are safe because you pay credentialed people to keep you safe. But there is a profound paradox at level 4.
What's the paradox? If I'm paying a guy 10 grand a year to do my taxes, he better be protecting me from confiscation.
Your professionals, your standard CPAs, your standard financial advisors, are highly trained to optimize your wealth within the existing system.
Within the system.
They are brilliant at finding standard deductions, rebalancing your portfolio, harvesting tax losses, and managing your risk tolerance.
Yeah, standard stuff.
But they rarely, if ever, help you position your assets outside of the structural systems of confiscation. They're playing by the rules of the game that the government designed.
And the government always designs the rules to ensure they win in the end.
Exactly. Because you feel protected by your professionals, you develop a blind spot to structural confiscation. You confuse tax preparation with tax architecture.
So the professionals are just expertly rearranging the deck chairs, but they aren't steering the ship away from the iceberg. They are just making sure the chairs look neat when the ship goes down.
That is a very accurate metaphor.
What are the icebergs at level 4?
There are 3 primary mechanisms of structural confiscation at this tier. Mechanism 1 is the IRPA surcharges.
IRMA. IRMAA. What does that stand for, and how does it drain a multimillionaire?
It stands for the Income-Related Monthly Adjustment Amount. Remember the RMDs we discussed at level 2 and 3?
Right.
The forced withdrawals that kick in at age 73.
Right, the forced liquidations from the 401k that you said trigger audits.
At level 4, those RMDs are massive because your account balances are massive. If you have $3 million in a tax-deferred account, your forced withdrawals are going to be well into the 6 figures annually.
So hundreds of thousands of dollars.
This creates a mountain of forced taxable income every year. What most people, and surprisingly even some advisors, fail to project accurately is how that forced income interacts with Medicare.
Medicare.
The IRMAA surcharge is essentially a stealth wealth tax tied directly to your Medicare premiums. Because your RMDs push your modified adjusted gross income so high, the government aggressively scales up the cost of your Medicare Parts B and D.
How much extra are we talking about? Is it just a few bucks a month?
It can drain up to $11,000 extra per year from a retiree household.
11,000.
And remember, this isn't an income tax. This is an additional surcharge stacked on top of the income tax you already paid on the RMD itself.
So it's double dipping.
It's a dual-layered extraction. You pay taxes on the forced withdrawal, and that very same withdrawal forces you to pay vastly inflated healthcare premiums. It is a brilliantly designed, quiet confiscation that most retirees don't realize is happening until they get the letter from the Social Security Administration telling them their premiums have tripled.
11 grand a year just vanishing into a premium surcharge because you saved too much money in a 401k and your CPA didn't warn you about the threshold. That is brutal. It's a penalty for saving.
It is.
But it gets worse, doesn't it? Let's talk about mechanism 2 at level 4, the estate tax cliff. Because if I'm at level 4, I'm starting to think about legacy. I'm thinking about leaving this money to my kids.
This requires us to look at the immediate legislative reality, purely from a mathematical standpoint.
Okay.
As we sit here today, the federal estate tax exemption, meaning the total amount of money and property you can pass on to your heirs completely free of federal death taxes, is historically quite high.
What is it right now?
It sits at $13.6 million per individual.
Which sounds like level 4 is totally safe. If I have 4 million or 5 million, I'm well under the 13.6 million limit. I can pass it all to my kids tax-free. My CPA tells me not to worry about estate taxes.
But you have to look at the calendar, and your CPA is likely only looking at the current tax year. The calendar. We are rapidly approaching the sunset provision of the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act in 2026, unless Congress takes decisive action, which historically, when dealing with contentious tax law, is never guaranteed. That $13.6 million exemption is legally scheduled to sunset.
Sunset meaning it goes away.
It will be automatically cut nearly in half, dropping back down to roughly $7 million, adjusted for inflation.
Okay, let's unpack this. If a couple listening right now has been highly successful, maybe they built a regional business, they have some commercial real estate, a primary home that's gone up in value, and a healthy stock portfolio. They could easily be sitting on an $8 million or $10 million estate.
Easily.
Right now, today, their CPA is telling them they are entirely safe from the estate tax. But when that sunsets on January 1st, 2026...
the math violently changes overnight. Suddenly, millions of dollars of their level 4 estate are pushed over the new cliff. And the federal estate tax is not a gentle slope.
No.
It is a brutal, flat, 40% death tax on every single dollar above the exemption limit.
40%.
Let's do the math on your hypothetical couple. If the exemption drops to $7 million, and their estate is worth $9 million.
They have $2 million exposed above the new limit.
The government is taking $800,000 of that $2 million before their children see a dime.
Oh my God.
It is a wealth confiscation cliff that is approaching at breakneck speed, and the professionals who only optimize within the current year's rules are leaving their clients completely exposed to this structural shift.
40%, almost half of everything you built just gone because the calendar turned to 2026 and your advisor didn't build a structural defense. $800,000 wiped out.
Exactly.
And speaking of the kids, that brings us to mechanism 3. We've talked about the Secure Act a couple of times today regarding those forced RMDs for retirees, but it has a very specific, very nasty surprise for the next generation, right? Forced liquidation.
Yes. The Secure Act fundamentally dismantled the most powerful generational wealth transfer tool the middle and upper middle class had, the stretch IRA.
I remember the stretch IRA. You could inherit your parents' IRA and just slowly take out tiny amounts over the rest of your life. You could stretch it out based on your own life expectancy, letting the bulk of it grow tax-free for decades. It was the ultimate way to set up your kids.
Exactly. It was a beautiful tool for generational compounding. The Secure Act killed it.
Kill it completely.
Congress realized too much money was sitting tax-deferred across multiple generations, so they rewrote the rules. Now, when your children inherit your traditional IRA or 401k, they are subjected to the 10-year rule.
The 10-year rule.
They are legally forced to withdraw the entire balance of the account and pay the income taxes on it within exactly 10 years of the year of your death.
Okay, but 10 years still sounds like a decent amount of time to spread out the tax hit. Why is it so devastating for a level 4 estate?
Look at the demographics of inheritance. When do most people inherit money from their parents?
Usually when the parents pass away in their late 80s or early 90s.
Which means the children inheriting the money are typically in their late 50s or early 60s.
Right, they aren't kids anymore. They are well into their own careers.
Precisely. Let's say your son is 58 years old. He is a successful architect earning $150,000 a year. He is at the absolute apex of his career.
To making the most money he will ever make.
Sitting in the highest tax bracket he will ever experience. And right at that exact moment, you pass away and leave him a $1.5 million IRA.
Wow.
The IRS now forces him to dump hundreds of thousands of dollars of inherited IRE distributions on top of his peak salary every year for a decade.
Oh, man. It's
It forces him into the highest possible marginal tax brackets, state and federal.
Hmm.
If he lives in a high-tax state like California or New York, he could easily be losing 40 to 50% of that inheritance to taxes.
50%.
The government doesn't just confiscate the wealth, they expertly time the forced liquidation to ensure it is taxed at the absolute maximum possible rate.
That is just, it's engineered. It's perfectly engineered extraction. They wait for you to die, they wait for your kids to be in their highest earning years, and then they drop the anvil.
They do.
So level 4, prosperity, is really just an illusion if you are only relying on standard CPAs. You are getting hit with $11,000 IRMAA surcharges. You are staring down a 40% estate tax cliff in 2026, and your kids are going to be gutted by the 10-year forced liquidation of the Secure Act. You aren't prosperous, you're just a massive lucrative target.
A lucrative target indeed.
Which brings us to the very top of the pyramid, level 5.
The legacy tier.
The legacy tier. We are talking $5 million and vastly above. Tens of millions, hundreds of millions. Now, I am incredulous here. I fought you on level 2. I conceded level 4, but I'm going to fight you again here.
Let's hear it.
If 5 million or 50 million isn't safe, what on earth is? Surely these people have the ultimate tools. They don't just have standard CPAs. They have massive legal architectures.
We do.
The source materials mention dynasty trusts, family limited partnerships, private placement life insurance. It seems like their tax exposure, legally speaking, should approach 0. They literally employ the people who write the tax laws.
And you would be right regarding the tax laws. At level 5, standard tax mechanics fail to penetrate the defenses. The wealth is wrapped in layers of sophisticated corporate and trust architecture.
Yeah.
Generation-skipping trusts, offshore holding companies, complex insurance wrappers. From a purely statutory tax perspective, they have built an impenetrable fortress. A standard IRS audit bounces right off a well-constructed dynasty trust.
So what's the threat? If the tax code can't touch them, if the IRS can't break through the trusts, what's the blind spot for the ultra-wealthy?
The fatal blind spot is assuming that legal structures are sufficient against the ultimate threat, which is sovereign risk.
Sovereign risk, as in the risk of the sovereign nation itself. The country.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, all of those dynasty trusts, all of those family limited partnerships, all of those meticulously crafted LLCs, they only exist because the laws of the sovereign nation allow them to exist.
The government wrote the laws.
The government wrote the laws that created the concept of a trust, and the government, acting as a sovereign power, possesses the absolute authority to rewrite those laws or suspend them entirely during a crisis.
So it's like playing a game of chess. The level 5 guys think they have an unbeatable strategy. They've memorized every move. They have their bishops and knights perfectly positioned.
But their opponent is the one who owns the chessboard.
And if the opponent starts losing, they have the power to simply flip the board over.
Exactly. When a nation faces a severe debt crisis, a currency collapse, or a massive demographic pension shortfall, the rules of private property can be altered overnight. The illusion of level 5 is believing that a piece of paper drawn up by a lawyer will stop a desperate sovereign state. Let me give you historical precedents of shifting rules, because this is not theoretical. It happens regularly throughout history.
Let's hear the precedent.
Let's look at Hungary in 2010.
2010 is so recent.
Very recent. The government was facing a massive budget deficit, crippling national debt, and the imminent threat of a sovereign debt downgrade from international ratings agencies. They were on the brink of default.
So what did they do?
To balance the books, they didn't raise taxes incrementally, they didn't audit the rich, they simply issued an ultimatum to the citizens. Either hand over your private individual pension funds to the state, or forfeit your right to the basic state pension entirely.
Hand them over.
In effect, they nationalized $14 billion of privately held wealth with the stroke of a pen.
Wait, they just absorbed private retirement accounts that people had saved into their entire lives, just like my 401k. They just took them to pay off the national debt.
Yes. They absorbed the assets to make the state's balance sheet look solvent. The legal structure of those private pensions meant absolutely nothing when the sovereign state decided it needed the capital to survive.
That is chilling.
But we don't even have to look overseas to find sovereign risk. We can look right here at home.
It's in the U.S.
1933, America. The country is in the absolute depths of the Great Depression. A massive deflationary spiral is destroying the banking system. Thousands of banks have failed, and citizens are hoarding physical gold because they don't trust the paper currency.
Right.
What did President Franklin D. Roosevelt do?
Executive Order 6102. I remember reading about this in an economics class, but it always seems like ancient history, like something from a black and white movie that couldn't happen today.
It is the ultimate lesson in sovereign risk,
Hmm.
and it is highly relevant today. Roosevelt used emergency powers to essentially criminalize the private ownership of gold.
Criminalize it.
Citizens were ordered under threat of a $10,000 fine, which is an astronomical sum in 1933, and up to 10 years in federal prison to surrender their gold coins, bullion, and certificates to the Federal Reserve. They were paid the official, government-mandated price of $20.67 per ounce.
So they were compensated. I mean, I don't like the threat of 10 years in prison, but if the government paid them the market price for the gold, that doesn't sound like confiscation. It sounds like a forced sale.
They were compensated in paper currency, yes, but immediately after the gold was collected from the public, once the Treasury had secured the physical assets, the government passed the Gold Reserve Act of 1934.
And what did that do?
This act overnight revalued the price of gold from $20.67 to $35 an ounce.
Oh, wow.
See the math? By forcing the citizens to sell at 20 and then instantly changing the peg to 35, the government effectively devalued the citizens' wealth by roughly 41% and transferred that purchasing power directly to the Treasury.
That's incredible.
They seized the hard asset, devalued the paper currency they gave the citizens in exchange, and recapitalized the government at the direct expense of the citizens' wealth. The citizens followed the law, surrendered their assets, and were instantly impoverished by 41% because the sovereign entity changed the rules.
A 41% instant devaluation. That is breathtaking. It's brilliant from a government standpoint, but absolutely devastating if you were the one holding the gold. But surely they can't do that today. That was the Great Depression.
The legal mechanisms to do things exactly like this still exist today, and they are broader than ever.
Broader.
Consider the IEPA, the International Emergency Economic Powers Act. Under a declared national emergency, the executive branch has incredibly broad powers to regulate, freeze, confiscate property, and halt financial transactions.
Unbelievable.
At level 5, your threat isn't a 1099 form or a standard audit. Your threat is the possibility that a future administration, drowning in $35 trillion of national debt and facing a bond market crisis, declares an economic emergency and simply rewrites the rules of ownership.
Because they can.
Your bespoke dynasty trust won't save you if the laws governing domestic trusts are suspended by executive decree.
So the ultimate blind spot for the ultra-wealthy is trusting that the government will continue to respect the complex legal structures it created, even when the government itself is facing bankruptcy. That is a chilling thought. Doesn't matter how thick the vault door is if the government owns the building.
Precisely.
All right, I am thoroughly stripped of my initial optimism. I started this deep dive feeling like a king with my 500,000, and now I feel like I'm standing in a minefield blindfolded.
That's the reality of the architecture.
But we promised our listeners more than just fear. This isn't just about pointing out the traps. We promised a playbook. We promised the exact forensic defense framework to build a fortress around their wealth, regardless of what tier they are in. So let's transition from fear to action. Let's rebuild the pyramid, but this time with defenses.
Let's do it.
If you are listening to this right now, grab a pen. This is how you survive. How do we defend levels 1 and 2? The survival and stability tiers, the folks who are completely visible through traditional 401k, facing the slow bleed of inflation and staring down the RMD traps.
For levels 1 and 2, the primary directive is twofold: reduce visibility and preserve purchasing power. You must take proactive steps before the automated traps spring shot.
Step 1.
Tactic 1 is moving excess savings into assets that the government does not automatically track via the digital banking architecture. Remember, we want to lower the digital footprint of your wealth.
How do you do that legally?
One highly effective method is acquiring physical silver or gold via compliant dealers. As long as you navigate the purchasing rules correctly, meaning you are buying physical bullion, not digital ETF shares holding physical metals in your direct possession, removes that capital from the automated 1099 reporting loop.
It takes it off the grid, essentially.
It protects your purchasing power against the silent confiscation of inflation that we discussed in level 1, and it reduces your visibility as a sitting duck.
Okay, so take some chips off the digital table, have some wealth that doesn't trigger an algorithm. What's tactic 2 for the level 2 sitting duck who is staring down those massive required minimum distributions at age 73? If I have 500K in a traditional 401K, how do I defuse the bomb?
Tactic 2 is aggressive, methodical Roth conversions. This is how you dismantle the trap before it goes off.
Roth conversions.
Instead of leaving the money in the traditional 401k or IRA where the government controls the future tax rate and forces the distribution schedule, you willingly pay the tax today. You convert those funds from traditional to Roth.
But wait, if I do a Roth conversion, doesn't that mean paying a big tax bill right now? Isn't that exactly what I'm trying to avoid?
Yes, you pay a tax bill now, but you pay the tax at known historically low rates today. As we discussed, tax rates are scheduled to rise, and RMDs force you to take money when you might not want to.
Right.
But once that money is inside the Roth architecture, the paradigm shifts entirely. The government can no longer force you to take required minimum distribution.
Wait, Roth IRAs don't have RMDs.
Roth IRAs do not have RMDs during your lifetime. The capital grows completely tax-free, and you can withdraw it completely tax-free whenever you want. You permanently eliminate the future sitting duck forced liquidations.
You reclaim control of your own timeline.
Exactly. By paying a known controlled amount today, you prevent an unknown forced confiscation tomorrow.
Pay the known tax today to avoid the unpredictable forced tax tomorrow. That makes total sense. I'm treating a current cost for future sovereignty over my own money. Okay, let's move up to level 3 defense. The comfort tier. These are the folks listening who have 500,000 to 1.5 million, and their biggest nightmare is the Dodd-Frank bail-in, where the bank fails and legally converts their cash into worthless bank stock. How do you defend against the Cyprus scenario?
The defense against bail-in risk is ruthless custody diversification.
Ruthless custody diversification.
The rule is absolute and non-negotiable. Never hold more than $250,000, the FDIC insured limit, in a single banking institution.
Period.
If you have $1 million in cash because you sold a property, it needs to be spread across at least 4 completely separate, unaffiliated banking entities.
Unaffiliated is key there, right? You can't just open 4 checking accounts at Chase.
Exactly. 4 separate banks. By doing this, you keep 100% of your capital fully insured and structurally immune to the orderly liquidation authority. They cannot legally bail in insured deposits.
Simple, but you have to actually go through the friction of setting up multiple accounts. And what about the physical metals? We talked about that brutal 28% collectibles tax. If I'm diversifying into hard assets, how do I hold them safely without getting trapped?
If you are at level 3 and holding substantial physical metals, you must remove them from the commercial banking system. Do not use a bank safety deposit box.
Why not?
During a crisis or a bank holiday, like what happened in Cyprus, or during the Great Depression, access to your safety deposit box can be frozen by the bank or the government.
They lock the doors.
You must store physical metals in allocated, non-bank private vaults. Allocated is the operative word. It means you own the specific, serialized bars or coins, not a fractional share of a massive pool.
You own the actual asset.
This ensures direct legal title to the asset outside the banking architecture entirely.
Brilliant. Okay, level 4 defense. The prosperity tier. The $1.5 to $5 million estate staring down the estate tax cliff in 2026, and the Secure Act forced liquidations for their kids. How do we build what our notes call generational architecture? Walk me through exactly how a level 4 listener protects their legacy.
At level 4, you must move beyond standard tax repairs and utilize advanced legal structures to proactively strip assets out of your taxable estate before the 2026 cliff hits. You have to shrink the visible estate while maintaining the wealth.
How do you do that?
We utilize tools like charitable remainder trusts, or CRTs. Let me walk you through an exact scenario.
Please do.
Let's say a listener owns a plumbing business worth $3 million. If they sell it outright, they get crushed by capital gains taxes, and that $3 million now sits in their estate, pushing them closer to the 40% death tax cliff.
Right.
Instead, they transfer the ownership of the business into a charitable remainder trust. The trust, as a tax-exempt entity, sells the business. 0 capital gains tax is paid at the time of the sale. The full $3 million is preserved inside the trust. The trust then pays the listener an income stream, say 5 to 7% annually, for the rest of their life. When the listener passes away, the remainder of the trust goes to a designated charity.
Okay.
Crucially, from day one, that $3 million asset is legally removed from their taxable estate, permanently mitigating the 40% death tax hit.
Okay, that sounds great for avoiding the tax and getting an income stream, but if the remainder goes to charity when I die, what do my kids get? I just gave away their inheritance to save on taxes.
That is where the second piece of the architecture comes in, the Irrevocable Life Insurance Trust, or ILI.
And like,
You take a portion of the income stream generated by the CRT income you wouldn't have had if you paid the capital gains tax, and you use it to fund a massive life insurance policy. But you do not own the policy. The policy is owned inside an ILI.
okay, so the trust owns it.
When you pass away, the CRT remainder goes to charity, fulfilling that obligation. But simultaneously, the life insurance policy pays out a $3 million death benefit directly to your children.
Directly to them.
Because the policy is owned by the irrevocable trust and not by you, the payout is completely income tax-free and estate tax-free.
Wow. Let me wrap my head around this. You are effectively scrapping a highly taxable, illiquid asset, the business, for a completely tax-free, liquid cash payout to your heirs, all while drawing an income for yourself while you are alive.
Precisely. You have replaced the heavily taxed asset with an untaxed pool of liquid capital for the next generation. That is how you defeat both the estate tax cliff and the Secure Act's 10-year forced liquidation rule.
Right.
The children receive tax-free cash, not a taxable inherited IRA.
That is next-level architecture. That is playing chess while the IRS is playing checkers. All right, the final frontier. Level 5 defense, the legacy tier, 5 million plus. The folks facing sovereign risk, where the government might just change the rules of the game like FDR in 33 or Hungary in 2010. How on earth do you defend against the sovereign power that writes the laws and controls the military?
You achieve jurisdictional sovereignty.
Jurisdictional sovereignty.
Because domestic legal structures are not enough. If a single government can suspend them via emergency decree, your wealth must be diversified across multiple legal jurisdictions. You cannot rely on a single flag to protect you.
Meaning, outside the country, you take the wealth offshore.
Yes, you must plant flags in different sovereign nations. You establish an offshore trust in a jurisdiction with ironclad asset protection laws that do not automatically recognize U.S. court judgments, such as the Cook Islands or Nevis.
Cook Islands.
You hold physical assets, like precious metals, in allocated vaults in highly stable jurisdictions like Switzerland or Singapore. You pursue second passports or residencies by investment, ensuring you have a legal right to exist and transact outside of your home country.
So you're not trapped.
The primary goal is to ensure that no single sovereign entity, not even your home country, has total jurisdictional authority over all of your capital. You keep a significant portion of your wealth outside the traditional domestic banking and legal architecture entirely.
Makes sense.
If one nation faces a debt crisis and changes the rules, if they declare a bank holiday or nationalize pensions or try to seize assets, your wealth is insulated because it resides in a jurisdiction that is structurally immune to those domestic emergency powers.
It's the ultimate diversification, not just diversifying your asset classes between stocks and bonds, but diversifying the legal frameworks that govern your right to own them in the first place. You are ensuring that one government's bad math doesn't destroy your family's legacy.
That is the goal.
So, what does this all mean? As we wrap up this deep dive, the paradigm shift is clear. The days of thinking you are safe just because you hit a certain number in your 401k, the days of assuming the rules won't change, are over.
Long over.
Modern confiscation isn't a soldier kicking down your door in the middle of the night. It is highly architectural. It is a slow, methodical process built into the system itself.
It's into the code.
It is the silent drain of inflation robbing the level 1 household. It is a required minimum distribution forcing the level 2 retiree into a higher tax bracket. It is a bank bail-in wiping out cash reserves.
It is an IRMAA surcharge, quietly inflating your Medicare premium.
Yes. It is a 10-year forced withdrawal gutting your children's inheritance under the Secure Act. The threat isn't illegal theft. The threat is entirely legal, heavily legislated extraction.
And that is exactly why we conduct these deep dives. I want to ask you, the listener, to reflect on everything we've unpacked today. Look at your own balance sheet. Which of the 5 levels are you currently in?
Be honest with yourself.
And more importantly, what actions are you taking right now? Are you recognizing the vulnerability of the sitting duck phase? Are you actively executing Roth conversions to escape the level 2 RMD trap and permanently reclaim control of your tax timeline?
Are you spreading your cash to avoid Dodd-Frank bail-ins?
The knowledge we've shared today is completely useless unless it is applied to your specific architecture.
Absolutely, you have to take action. And before we sign off, I want to leave you with one final provocative thought, a breadcrumb for you to explore on your own. We talked a lot about physical assets, trusts, and avoiding taxes, but we only scratched the surface of how the true elites handle this at the highest levels.
The very highest levels.
If you want to understand the exact advanced strategies that level 4 and level 5 investors use to completely eliminate taxes on their assets while still living a lavish lifestyle, you need to look into the buy, borrow, die framework.
It's fascinating.
It is a strategy that bypasses the income tax system entirely by leveraging debt against appreciating assets instead of selling them. Look it up. It will completely change how you view debt, tax, and wealth. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Remember, the game is complex, but the rules can be learned and the defenses can be built.
The future belongs to the owners.
Stay informed, stay vigilant, and we will see you on the next one.